I can imagine most of you watching have likely never heard of this video game adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's beloved novel. To be honest, I probably never would have had it not been for Red Guy, my big reviewing influence who's praised it as one of his favourite games both on his channel and my podcast. So I've been meaning to check it out for a while now, and having finally gotten the adapter needed to record the GameCube through Elgato, now seemed like a good time to get started. So, here we go! Now, even if you haven't read the book or seen the trilogy, or heck, even know about the Forgotten 70s animated version, I'm sure you all know about the world of Middle-earth and the character of Bilbo Baggins, the titular hobbit who was persuaded by wizard Gandalf to journey with 13 dwarves to reclaim their homeland in the Lonely Mountains seized by the dragon Smaug. I myself haven't read the book, although I would like to now that I've played this, but I did go back and revisit Peter Jackson's take on the material as I was playing this. There isn't a lot to compare, and while I do mostly enjoy the films in spite of how much padding there is, it did help me appreciate the game's approach to this story more. Not that I didn't like it from the get-go, but I was initially taken aback by how unprevalent it is. Most of it is told through narration and still images before each level, and it's more focused on creating the atmosphere for the journey than it is in establishing memorable characters. However, this lends the game a storybook quality that I thought worked really well, and while at first I wished there had been more personality to the dwarves, I didn't mind after going back to Jackson's films and seeing that only Thorin is given proper development, whereas the rest of the crew are minor background presences. Guessing that's just how it is in the book, but whatever, it's no biggie. And what counts is that Bilbo himself is a very entertaining lead. The expressiveness of his design leads to sequences that feel almost British in their sense of humour, which fit with the tone the game is going for. As you can clearly see, that tone is different to how most people think of Lord of the Rings visually nowadays, but time has been kind to this art style outside of the pre-rendered cutscenes, which are a mixed bag graphically. But the in-game stuff still holds up quite well, a colourful and charming look that's complemented by some really good voice acting, most notably from Bilbo and the narrator, as well as a great soundtrack. Now, watching footage of this game might conjure up Zelda comparisons, which I can certainly understand in its fantasy aesthetic as well as the puzzles and combat, but as I begun the game I was struck by how much I was reminded of certain Mario titles. That's partly because of the platforming, but also the wealth of content that can be found in just a single level. If you're purely focused on the main task, you can probably get through the Shire level at the beginning of the game fairly quickly. But the townsfolk may ask for your assistance in small tasks. You can play hide and seek with the creepy kids. There's a maze with berries to find as long as the owner doesn't try and chat. There's quite a bit to discover in this small area, and I was shocked at how quickly I got engrossed into this world through the side undertakings. And I know it came out many years after, but I was reminded of Mario Odyssey, in which there's tons of deviations in a single area that rewards the player just as much as the main quest. As for the Hobbit, those rewards aren't power moons, but rather money that's only used at the end of each level, and courage points. If you collect enough of these jewels by completing quests, killing enemies, and just finding scattered about, you'll get an extra bubble of health. It's actually pretty addictive collecting them. Some particularly valuable ones will be tucked away in crevices and whatnot, encouraging further exploration through platforming that I was more than happy to do because the platforming is so much fun. The controls feel smooth, jumping between ropes works well, and using Bilbo's walking stick for further propulsion is seriously satisfying to pull off. The designs of the many ruins and cliffsides you'll be climbing require tight and exciting jumping that doesn't show its age. It's rarely clunky or awkward to maneuver about. The only thing that bothers me is when a fall I'm not thinking will do much damage obliterates Bilbo's health, but outside of that, it's a blast. One of the things the game excels at is variety. You're always moving from gameplay type to gameplay type at a rapid yet welcome pace, and the next most prominent thing you'll be doing is fighting monsters. The combat is very simple. You'll mainly be mashing the attack button, but it's somewhat satisfying, particularly when chucking rocks at faraway foes. It's easy to get overwhelmed when a few too many enemies are attacking, miss landing a hit, and you're gonna get rapidly attacked back instantly. I really wish I'd learned there was a lock-on button before I played through the whole thing, because there were times when I really craved that and a dodge move. However, okay, I have to confess something before I make my next point. I was an idiot and softlocked the game in the third to last level by pushing a block off where it's supposed to be and then saved the game, leaving it permanently stuck. So I actually had to play for about 80% of this game twice to catch up. And I found some of the combat scenarios that gave me a lot of trouble the first time I handled a lot better on the second. So maybe the tough crowds aren't that big a problem. The only thing I can say for certain is those spiders annoy the crap out of me when I'm just trying to get to the next area. But anyway, the fighting still offers some thrills, but it's not the game's biggest strength. There are some opponents that you won't be fighting head on, and we get a few brief stealth encounters, the latter ones letting you use the One Ring, which luckily just makes you invisible without the addiction side effects. That's handy. The first level in which the ring is a big asset is where you have to hide from elves to get into their kingdom. It would have been a fun challenge had I not realized that making noise just causes those you're sneaking from to say something like,
"Was that the wind?"
without them even going to search for you. And even though the ring does have a power meter, it's still very easy to hide before taking the ring off to let it recharge. So at times, the stealth is arguably non-existent, but on the flip side, the level in which you're sneaking around Smaug does require you to remain quiet, and that whole sequence is great, becoming very tense when you take a wrong step. The sequence with the trolls is also similar in its enjoyable suspense, likewise the section in Lake Town where the ring greatly helps without feeling overpowered. I also liked using it in the final level, sprinting my way through a warring battlefield unnoticed to deliver a message 1917 style. Oftentimes, a lot of the elements at play mesh together really nicely, and the locations in which you'll be doing all these things are a thrill to explore. Most of the time, they're somewhat linear, which keeps you moving at a brisk pace, and it's very satisfying to progress through the intricate designs, which takes you everywhere that looks interesting while still hiding a few secrets away for those wishing to rummage further. You get a tally of how many coins, courage points, quests, and chests you've found/completed, which should greatly excite completionist enthusiasts. Oh, and talking of chests, it's such a small feature, but there's this mini game you have to play to get the contents of the chest, which was really fun to me. All you're doing is pressing the button at the right time, but it feels really good to nail it. And going back to that Mario Odyssey comparison, some levels can be a single open location that you can freely explore. At first, these are within homely locations like the Shire and Lake Town, but the penultimate level of the game places Bilbo in a big area, darting from room to room, solving all these different puzzles. It's the later stages where puzzle solving becomes more prevalent and not just some environmental stuff, and they can require a fair bit of brain power. They're very Professor Layton-esque, a cliche comparison for me, I know, but they can similarly take a while to wrap your head around before falling into place oh so rewardingly. Not all of them make complete sense. I solved this barrel one fine at first, but during my second playthrough it kind of confused me. And speaking of barrels, why did we get this irritating minecart section instead of a barrel riding set piece? I mean, maybe that would have been a bit too ambitious for the time, but they could have been really fun. Ah well, anyway, that's the Hobbit game. It's got a couple of issues, but on the whole, I really liked it. Those occasional hiccups are definitely lessened by a lack of repetition. The combat alone wouldn't make the best game, but accompanying all these other components improves its fun factor significantly. and the blend of action, platforming, brain teasers, and charming fantasy tone that really appealed to me is created, which had me hooked right off the bat. And if you have a console the game was released on, I really recommend finding a copy. There's enough variance in the gameplay types that you ought to get something out of at least one of them. Just don't mess with this block where you're not supposed to. But I have to admit, I only intended to speedrun my way through there and back again to catch up, but I got caught up in finding jewels and completing additional quests again. I didn't expect to enjoy repeating parts I had done in only a couple of days prior as much as I did, but it really held up, and if that doesn't let you know how entertaining this game is, I don't know what will.